The Stolen Generations Genocide represents one of Australia's most devastating and enduring violations of human rights. The genocide was characterised by systematic government policies involving the forced removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children to be assimilated into white society and to eradicate Indigenous cultures. Between 1910 and the 1970s, tens of thousands of children were taken from their families, with many suffering abuse, identity loss, and lifelong trauma. The short-term impacts of the genocide included broken families, psychological harm, and widespread cultural disconnection. Over time, the long-term impacts extended across generations, entrenching social inequality and mistrust in government institutions, as descendants of the stolen generations experienced continued marginalisation and systematic discrimination. Culturally, languages and traditions were severely disrupted, while politically, Australia faced domestic and international criticism. Throughout Australia's history, the Indigenous population have faced continuous discrimination and violence. One of the most devastating impacts of these atrocities was the forced removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families. The Stolen Generations represents a form of genocide carried out through deliberate government and church policies that target Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children for removal. These acts align with the 1948 UN Genocide Convention, which defines genocide to include the forcible transfer of children and causing serious mental harm to a group. Indigenous children were taken from their families and placed in institutions or foster homes where their language, culture, and identity was systematically suppressed. A photograph from St. Joseph's Orphanage in New Yorkshire, Western Australia, captures this assimilation in action. Indigenous children lined up for inspection by church and state officials. This visually symbolises the erasure of culture and community. This image also supports other testimonies of cultural disconnection, isolation, and institutional abuse. The Bringing Them Home report, a national inquiry into the separation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders from their families, affirms that a forcible removal was a gross violation of human rights, framing these actions as genocide under international law. These policies were racially motivated, aiming to eliminate Indigenous identity through assimilation to white society. Several stages from the genocide model were evident. Classification through racial labelling of Indigenous Australians as inferior, dehumanisation via portrayals of Indigenous families as unfit, and persecution as children were removed in large numbers by protection boards and placed in controlling institutions such as the Kinchela Boys' Home. This is supported by government reasoning at the time, evident through the former Commissioner of Native Affairs in Western Australia, A.O. Neville's statement, "You cannot change a native after he has reached the age of puberty, but before that it is possible to mould him." Though not involving mass killings, this genocide methodically destroyed family structures and cultural continuity. The long delay before the 2008 national apology reflects the state's efforts to conceal the extent of its actions under the appearance of care and protection. The short-term impacts of the Stolen Generation were immediately devastating across social, cultural, economic, and political aspects, stripping Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of their culture and identity. Socially, the psychological trauma was immediate for children and their families. Survivors faced shame and isolation from both wider Australian society and at times their own communities, often struggling to trust and form relationships due to broken family bonds. Culturally, they were cut off from their heritage, lands, and language and placed in institutions such as schools and foster homes that actively suppressed Indigenous identity. Economically, many children were denied proper education or trained only for menial work, leading to exploitation as unpaid domestic labour and eliminating future financial independence. Politically, Indigenous Australians were denied legal agency, with government authorities empowered to remove children without consent, following the 1909 Aboriginal Protection Act, leaving families voiceless. As noted in the Bring Them Home report, in some states in the Northern Territory, the Chief Protector was made the legal guardian of all Aboriginal children, displacing the rights of parents, exemplifying the erosion of parental rights. These short-term impacts laid the foundation for long-lasting cycles of disadvantage and trauma still affecting Indigenous communities today. The long-term impacts of the Stolen Generations are profoundly damaging and intergenerational, embedding trauma and disadvantage into Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Actually, what you see in a lot of us is the show, but sometimes the past is just too hard to look at. This quote, a statement made by a survivor of the Stolen Generations, highlights how survivors often carry deep, unresolved trauma beneath the surface. They struggle with the long-lasting emotional pain caused by being taken from their families and losing their cultural identity. This personal pain is only one aspect of a much broader effect of harm that continues to affect Indigenous communities across political, economic, cultural, and social aspects. Politically, the removal policies denied victims a voice in the nation's democratic processes. This eroded trust in government, contributing to continued underrepresentation in decision-making today. Economically, disrupted education has led to generational poverty and limited access to employment or financial security. This is evident through 38% of the Stolen Generation survivors aged 50 plus having no formal qualifications, compared to 15% of other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the same age group. Culturally, the loss of language and spiritual knowledge hindered links to identity. This weakened the transmission of culture across generations. Socially, the breakdown of family structures has fostered cycles of disconnection and mistrust. This has led to disproportionately high rates of incarceration and suicide amongst the Indigenous population, seen through Indigenous Australians making up over 32% of the national prison population. These ongoing consequences are woven into daily life and have been passed down through generations. The Stolen Generations Genocide was a deliberate and systematic attempt to erase Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander identity through forced child removal and cultural suppression. Its impacts have been profound and enduring, shattering individuals and families, silencing languages, and embedding cycles of trauma, inequality, and mistrust.